This is Jonathan Toshnik. The question is, can you share a list of all the client information that you collect from your clients? Because in one of the marketing PDFs, you talk about building the list and gathering as much information as possible. And can this information be stored in Service Autopilot? All the possible questions to build a strong list per individual client. So first and foremost, yes, this information can be stored in Service Autopilot. So let's talk about the actual business question. So that is, what kind of information do you gather about your clients, and what do you track? And this is a great question. So here, let me give you some fundamental information to track. And depending on the market and the client, you're going to want to track different information. So let me tell you about some of the things we track. So, and then tell you about some things we require of our staff to get. So at the most basic level, you've got to get company name, primary contact. You've got to get phone numbers, recommend more than one. You've got to get an email address. We pretty much require email addresses on everyone. And we push hard to get them, and they're not really that hard to get. And you then need to get property information. So that's your very, very basic information. Most people don't get email address, but I'd really encourage you to do that. It opens up a lot of marketing and communication opportunities. And when I say marketing, I'm not talking about hard, spammy type sales. I'm talking about informational type marketing, educational type marketing, taking better care of your client, telling them when it's raining, what you're going to do, when they can expect you, things that really lead to better customer service. But at the same time ultimately result in some level of marketing that results in upsells and such. So email is just massively critical. And email is really easy to get when you use something like a Service Autopilot, because you're getting an email address to let the client use it as their login to their client portal to fully manage their system or manage their account. So it's a no-brainer. Or if they want to get all their email receipts emailed to them, then you just get their email address to do that. So it doesn't even become, you have such a good reason to get it, it's a non-issue. So if you have a good reason, you can get email addresses. If you don't, they're not going to give them to you. So it's that simple, but get an email address. All right, so then we progress. So at a property, we want to know who the decision maker is. This becomes critically important at a commercial property. So you have who knows who asking for the RFP or the request for proposal or for the bid, but who's really the decision maker behind the scenes. So you've got a business owner that's charged an office secretary or someone with making a decision, or at least gathering the information and giving it to him. And so what you discover is happening is this individual's getting the information, you're doing all of this massive amount of legwork, and then you're giving her or him this information to give on to the business owner or to the decision maker who's never met you, never talked to you, you've never had a chance to win them over, they know nothing about you, and they're basically just evaluating you on price. You've had no chance to discover what their fears and concerns and dislikes are so that you can address each of them. So, imperative, you got to know who's making the decision. So you don't necessarily go and get all this information moment one in the conversation, but you need to get it pretty quickly. You need to start figuring this stuff out pretty quick. It could be in a follow-up conversation. So it's on you to figure out how to do this stuff creatively in regards to how can you go about gathering this information in a way that it's not pressuring and it's just part of the conversation flow, and you just kind of work in the question of, hey, who's making a decision on this? And then you work in, well, do they have any special likes or dislikes? Then you take it a little bit further, because somebody's going to be a blocker and try to keep you from this person, oftentimes in a commercial deal, because that person has said, hey, I don't have time to deal with this, you handle it. Well, you, as the guy that's about to invest all of his time and money in putting together this proposal, and you want to win this thing, you need to get in front of this person that's making the decision. So you need to figure out how you can ask questions of the screener or blocker that make it inevitable that the guy making the decision has to speak with you. Or you could flat out say, hey, we don't actually, if you want to get pretty tough, and as your business progresses, you'll gain more confidence in doing this, you can eventually get to the point and say, hey, basically here's the deal. When we do a proposal, we've really got to meet with this person or that person. And you just lay it out there and be honest. This is what we do. If we're going to do a proposal and the measurements and estimates of property, we have to talk to that person. And you don't do the bid otherwise. So, but you got to be willing to walk away from business. But what you're doing when you do that is you're upping your close ratios in a very significant way, and you're focusing your efforts on the properties you can actually have the best chance of winning. Sometimes when you get in front of a decision maker, you figure out that decision maker already has a buddy or a friend, and he's got some people he's accountable to, and he just needs to prove that buddy or friend is coming in at a fair rate, and he's got to just double check his rates. And he's about to run you through a whole lot of wasted time just to get some comparable proposals so he can hire his buddy. So when you get to talk to the guy in charge, you get to learn a lot of stuff. So that's critical information. You need to move towards getting that information, finding out who's in charge. Then when you get in front of the decision maker, you want to find out what do they hate about the company they have. Now, there's some reason they're getting rid of them. It's oftentimes they're going to come to you and say, well, we just want to get a different company. We're not real happy with them. And then you give them the quote and your price is higher. And they're like, oh, whoa, wait a second. Our company now is charging us this price. You're more. You need to learn these things up front so that when they come back with you with that stuff, you can come back to them and say, well, the reason we are more is because remember how that company doesn't show up? Oh, we actually show up. Remember how that company's a little light on insurance? Well, we actually have the insurance. Remember how that company has really made you upset because there's constantly weeds in front of your property and you have clients coming in and out of your property seeing these weeds and it doesn't present your business well, and you're charging your clients $100,000 per sale, yet your building looks terrible. You're not presenting a great first impression. You're not carrying a consistent representation of yourself. Well, we're not that way. And the reason we're not that way is we spend more money on chemicals and we do this and that and the other. That's why we have to charge a little bit more. You need to be armed for the moment when it happens that you have to have a discussion on price. The way you win that discussion is by being able to come back to all the reasons that your prospect laid out to you in the beginning of why they don't like the current vendor, why they didn't like the last 3 vendors, why they're shopping this again. You need to know all that and have answers for it. That's how you win the business. You're not going to win all your bids on lowest price. And if you are, you should be highly concerned. So you need to arm yourself and ask these questions so that you can win these conversations. So you need to know, why didn't they like their vendor? You need to know, what would they like in a vendor in a perfect scenario? You need to know that when they ask you for a bid and they only include 4 things on the bid spec, what are the other items that they really want? Because you want to know about those now. What are those things they wish they could afford? Know about them now. Take the measurements now where you're at the job site. You want to know with certainty that your bid spec is exactly the same as everybody else's bid spec. Because if you're bidding something different, or if you're including services they don't want, you will lose that bid. And so you need to make sure you're bidding equal so that you can turn in a bid that matches exactly the specs of everybody else's bid. And then you can give additional bids for additional work they'd like to have, but separate, or in some form where it's very clear to the buyer exactly what they're getting, so they can compare apples to other companies. So all of these types of questions are on you from moment one to gather. If it's a big property and there's a purchasing manager, you need to know who the purchasing manager is. That's generally who you're going to deal with. You need to understand what they want, what they expect, and you need to be very clear on the bid specs. If you're dealing with the property management company, exactly the same. Property management companies we see are a little bit more price driven in some cases, but at the same time they're people and they don't want to be hassled. They don't want a vendor that's going to cause them trouble where they're at the property and dealing with stuff all the time. So at the same time they are price driven, but yet at the same time they're also driven by the fact that they don't want their time wasted. You need to learn all these things about. So these aren't necessarily 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the questions you ask. These are things you weave into conversations. These are the broad concepts that you want to pull out of your clients. You want to understand their pain points. What didn't they like? What do they want? What would look like the perfect company? What are the things that they hate? What are the things they wish they could change? But yeah, they probably can't afford them. But go ahead and tell me what those things are you wish you could do. What if this property was perfect, what would it look like? Start learning these things about them, and then you document them. And eventually you sell this stuff to these clients after you earn their trust. Find out if their company was visiting them monthly. Were they really doing the irrigation inspections they quoted in the bid? So they come to you and they'll say, we want all this work, and they'll give you the bid spec from the previous year, and you'll find out that the company before you wasn't even doing half that stuff. So if you bid it, and you plan to actually do it, you're not actually going to have a competitive bid because somebody else bid it with the intention to never do it. And that's why they were able to provide a low bid. So these are a few things that you'll want to think about as you go through this process.